Dealing with the downs and ups in life. Today we want to look at the book of Esther, chapter number 3. I'll read verse number 2, but we're going to deal with the entirety of the book of Esther. Chapter 3, verse 2 forms for us the focus that we want to deal with today. Esther 3, verse 2. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. And the church said amen. Amen. Knowing when I must take a stand. Amen. Knowing when I must take a stand. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Said on one occasion, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Amen. Amen. In other words, there comes a time when you got to take a stand. Amen. How did we get to this point in the book of Esther? Well, you recall that the children of Israel, God gave the land of Israel to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, planted them there and affirmed to them that he would be their God and they would need to be obedient to him and that there would be consequences if they failed to be obedient. They disobeyed God, and as a consequence, they were removed out of the land. The northern tribes of Israel were removed in 722 BC by the Assyrians. And then about 606 to 586 BC, the Babylonians, the world power of that day, overthrew the southern tribes of Judah and took away captive then the children of God out of the land that God had purposed for them to have and to have perpetually. But God was very clear. His people needed to be obedient. And so the same word to us today, church, we have to be obedient to God. Amen. In order to receive and experience the fullness of what God has for us, we have to be obedient to God. Amen. Amen. When Solomon dedicated the temple in the book of 2 Chronicles, God confirmed with Solomon that when Israel would sin, they would call upon his name, that he would forgive them. He says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven. I will forgive their sin. I will heal their land. And so the remedy was repentance. But if they would not turn to God, they would deal with some dire consequences, and that is exactly what happened. When the Babylonians then overtook Jerusalem, and they destroyed the temple and took the sacred things from the temple to Babylon, and yet the Babylonians did not remain in power as the superpower. The Medo-Persian Empire, the Medes and Persians, then became the world power of the day. King Cyrus, who was then Medo-Persian king, signed a decree, though, as God had foreordained, that the children of Israel who had been taken captive were going to be allowed to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple and the city of Jerusalem. And many of the Jews did so. However, not all. Some remained in Persia. Thus, then the book of Esther deals with how God dealt with his people that remained in Persia, that did not initially return to Jerusalem when the return from captivity was undertaken under the leadership of Zerubbabel. And so here are God's people liberated in the sense that they've been allowed to go back, but some of them are still in Persia. Well, when we come to the book of Esther, the Persian king at this time is Ahasuerus or Xerxes. And he's king, and the book of Esther begins by telling us that he's throwing a party. And during the course of him throwing the party, his wife, Queen Vashti, is summoned, and she refuses to go to the party. And now there's a problem because he has assembled all of the princes, the leaders within his domain, within the kingdom, within the realm of his authority. And at the time that Vashti refuses to then go to the king as she is summoned, the king becomes upset. Well, not only does he become upset, but his boys start talking.
Yes, sir.
His boys start talking, and his boys tell him this. Now, look, King Ahasuerus, it's not just to you that she has been disrespectful.
Yes, sir.
But see, King, you got to do something about it, because if the word get out that you let her get away with it, when we get home, we're going to have problems on our hands. So, King, in order for us to not have any problem, you need to get rid of Vashti and get you another queen. Boys talking.
Amen.
The king listens to them, and so he then decides to dethrone Vashti and looks for another queen. Well, chapter 2 then brings us to the point where they are now out looking for fair maidens in the domain to audition, if you will, to become the next queen. Chapter 2, verse 5, listen to this. Now in Shushan, which is the capital where the king is, the palace, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. Now it tells us about Mordecai. He brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, and the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So, what do we have here? We're now introduced to Mordecai and then to Hadassah. Her Hebrew, her Jewish name is Hadassah, but she now has the name Esther. Now, part of what the Babylonians and the Persians did was when they removed those Hebrews from their native country to move into Babylon and to Persia, they would often change their names. Remember, over in the book of Daniel, we are told that those young men that we know better as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their Hebrew names was Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And so it was a thing that the Babylonians, the Persians, the conquering people did to try to change the names of those individuals in hopes of changing their psychology about accepting things as they were in a land of captivity. And so it tells us that her Hebrew name was Hadassah, but she's called Esther. Now it tells us this also. This was Mordecai's uncle's daughter. And so that's one of his cousins. His uncle's daughter. That's his cousin. But the scripture tells us that her father and mother are deceased. Now this should ring familiar to us because there was a time before the government was involved with a lot of the social issues of the society, that we as a people, when things happen in the family, we took care of the children. Y'all ought to wake up in here, church. We didn't look to the government, but you could always go and stay with grandmama or granddaddy, uncles or aunts or older cousins. But there was somebody in the family that were willing to take you in and take you under their wing and help take care of you. And I pray that we never lose that, church. That sense of connection to family. And so Mordecai raises her as his own daughter because her parents are now deceased. And notice that the Bible said this about her, that she was fair and beautiful. And so now she was good looking, but she also had a good attitude. They go hand in hand. Amen. So she was fair and beautiful. Now, later on, it tells us in the second chapter that Mordecai told Esther, now, don't tell folk where you from and who your people are. Hold that to yourself. And so then in verse number 11, but he would check on her. It says, Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. Because she's one of the ones that has now been selected to be in the running to be the next queen. Are we walking together, church? Now, as this is going on, the Bible says over in verse number 17, that ultimately Esther is selected to be the queen. All right, so now out of all of the beautiful maidens in Persia, it just so happens that Esther becomes the queen of the nation. Closing the chapter, verse 21 says this, in those days Mordecai sat in the king's gate, and two of the king's chamberlains were mad with the king and sought to slay the king. Mordecai makes it known to Esther. Esther tells the king's life is saved, and then they record that in the Chronicles of the king of Persia. And so now Mordecai does a great work in warning the king, but he does it through Esther. Let the king know there's some fellas out here in the street talking bad about him, and he need to watch his back. And when they checked it out, they found out who it was and handled business. And so now the king's life is preserved. Well, now chapter 3 brings us to Haman. Haman, the Bible says, these things did King Ahasuerus, after these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. So now over the course of time, Haman has now climbed the ladder of success so that now he's the highest ranking in the cabinet of the king. And it says that he's an Agagite. Scholars tell us that if we were to trace then his lineage, we would find out that he is an Amalekite by birth, that his ancestors were the Amalekites. And if you go back to the book of Exodus, you find out that the Amalekites were enemies to the children of God. They fought hard against the children of God, and yet God always would give his people the victory when they would be obedient to him. But here is now a man that has arisen, even in a foreign land, to heights that he's now second in command unto the king of Persia. And the Bible says this, all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman. For the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. It's something about this bowing to Haman don't sit well with Mordecai. And church, there should be something that don't sit well with us when we have to bow and compromise to our core principles. So now Haman passes by. Imagine us in the busy city, people going to and fro, in the king's gate, a lot of business is being transacted, but the king has put the decree out that whenever his number 2 man comes by, people ought to tip the cap, acknowledge him, give him some kind of recognition. And the Bible says, but when the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, why transgressest thou the king's commandment? Interesting. It's not initially Haman that recognizes it, but it's all those other ones who are there in the gate that they just, every time Haman comes by. And yet, Mordecai stands still. Don't bow. And don't give reverence. All right? So then they go to Mordecai and say, well, look, you breaking the law. You're not bound. It came to pass, verse 4, when they spake daily unto him, day after day after day. Mordecai, why you ain't bound? Look, everybody else bowing. Why aren't you bowing? Look, just because everybody else doing it don't make it right. Y'all got that today, church? Put that in your pocket and take it home with you. Because everybody else doing it don't make it right. So then Mordecai, they keep every day. But then look at this. He hearkened not to them. Mordecai ain't pay him no attention. It wasn't none of their business what he was doing. And yet, the Bible says this. Verse 4, when it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, they told Haman. See, if you're in a busy street, you don't really have, and you minding your business where you're going, you don't have time to check out what everybody's doing around you. But these fellas decided it wasn't enough just for them to know. They wanted Haman to know that Mordecai was not bound. And they did it to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. So they decided, let's see if this is an acceptable explanation as to why he's being disobedient. Then the Bible says in verse 5, when Haman saw, now he's looking for Mordecai. Y'all see that, church? Whereas before, it didn't come to his attention. But now he's looking for Mordecai. When it came, he saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then was Haman full of wrath. And church, know this. There's some folk around you, you might not know they're there, but they point you out. Because they want you to get in trouble. Because you have taken a stand. Verse 6, and he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So now Haman want to go get out the chariot and go lay hands on him. For they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. Now, you see how evil is? It wasn't satisfactory now just to try to go get Mordecai, but he gonna try to handle everybody that's connected to Mordecai. Amen. Here's what he does. He makes up some story about the Jews being insurrectionists in the kingdom, and goes tells the king that it's not a profit to him to allow and permit them to remain in his kingdom. And then he takes it a step further in verse 9. If it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those that have the charge of the business to bring it unto the king's treasure. Haman is willing to pay to do his destruction. He's willing to pay. Say, look, king, don't worry now, because if the king is concerned about the tax money that would have been coming in, that now if he exterminates these people, then that tax money may not be coming in. If he destroys these people. So Haman says, well, I'll give you some money so that you don't go to the loss of anything. That's evil, church. Would you agree that that's evil? So now he gets the king's okay, and then the time is set that they will now target to destroy Mordecai and his people. Chapter 4, when Mordecai realizes what has been done, he then places himself in sackcloth and ash. He takes off his fine clothes, and he puts on clothes of one who's mourning. Word gets to Esther that Mordecai is out there in the street, and he's in sackcloth and ash, and he is crying bitterly. She then sends him some clothes and tells him to dress up, because he knows that if the king finds out about him, then he's going to be in trouble, because that's not allowed in the king's gate. And yet Mordecai sends back to Esther and then tells her what the trouble is, that not only he is in and all of the people are in, but Esther, you in trouble too. Now it's time. Esther has got to make a decision. Chapter 4, verse 13. Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Mordecai says, Esther, pay attention now. It's no accident that you were selected to be the queen. Remember, this is an ungodly man, Ahasuerus, very reactionary, and yet God allowed you, out of all those in the kingdom, to be elevated to queen. Now don't think that Haman gonna let you slip just because you are in the palace with the king. Because one of the rules of the Medes and the Persians was that once they signed a law, it was forever law. Yes, sir. Could not be taken back. And so now he says to her, time to step up, Esther. Time for you to take a stand. Esther responds back to Mordecai and says in verse number 16, go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, day or night. I also and my mate will fast likewise, and so will I go unto the king, Ahasuerus, which is not according to the law. Because if the king don't tell you to come in, you just can't bust through that door. It didn't matter who you were, queen included. And she had already had that discussion with Mordecai when he told her to go and talk to the king. She said, wait a minute. He's had me out here for the last 30 days and I haven't seen his face. So what makes you think he's going to let me come in there now? But Mordecai says, you got to take a stand. Got to take a stand. So now she says, let's fast, and afterwards I will go into the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, period. She ready to take her stand now, y'all. She ready to take a stand now. You gotta be ready to know when you gotta take a stand, church. So then, chapter 5, on the third day. Remember, they're fasting 3 days, right? On the third day, she put on her apparel, and what do you know? The king extends the scepter to her for her to go in and talk to him. And then in chapter 5, verse 4, Esther answered, if it seem good to the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Wait a minute.
All right.
I got to put a pin in it there, y'all. Wait a minute. I thought that she needed to go on in and tell the king what was going on with Haman and get right to the point. But she doesn't. She says, I'm going to plan a banquet for you and for Haman to come to tomorrow, or let the king, until I have prepared for him this day. I want y'all to just come and have a nice time together. Why did she do that? I'm puzzled, y'all, so I had to keep reading. Y'all want to keep reading too? I'm puzzled. So it said now, when she gets to the banquet, and they there having a good time, verse number 8, she said this, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. So on the first day, the king said, what do you want? She says, well, I want y'all to just come to another banquet I'm going to plan tomorrow, and then I'll kind of explain everything. That's a strange request. Does that make sense to y'all, or I'm the only one that's kind of puzzled about it? I mean, she got him there with the king. Why she don't just tell the king? She said, no, I want y'all to come back tomorrow, and I'll let you know tomorrow what's going on. Now, when the fact that Haman has been invited to a little feast there with the queen and the king, you know he's a joyful fellow. Look at verse 9. Then when Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. So when he leaves where they are with the banquet, he's a happy fellow. Because didn't nobody else get invited but him. But notice the last part of the verse. But on his way home, when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Now notice, earlier it said that Mordecai didn't bow to him. The presumption is that Mordecai was standing when Haman passed. But this time, he didn't get up. And he didn't move an inch. So this time, if you allow me, Mordecai sit down. But he still don't give reverence to Haman. Whether he was standing, he didn't bow. Whether he was sitting, he didn't get up. His principle did not change, church. His principle didn't change, church. But now, on the way home, now Haman all mad now. When he gets home, he calls some of his boys and his wife and tells them what has happened. That after all of the good stuff that had happened when he was there with the queen and the king, but verse 13 says, yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. He just couldn't be happy because Mordecai wasn't giving him the reverence. Now, his wife, and the partners give him a suggestion. Said, now, here's what you ought to do for that Mordecai. Build some gallows for him to be hung on. And then tomorrow, go and talk to the king and get his permission. That although he's given permission to destroy all of the Jews on a certain date, Don't wait for Mordecai. Go and get specific approval to kill Mordecai right now. And so he builds some gallows right there at his house. Build gallows. Chapter 6. While all that's going on, nighttime falls, but the king can't go to sleep. And so they tell him, bring me the book and read to me out the book, because I can't go to sleep. Coincidental. Y'all think it's a coincidence he can't go to sleep? Some folks say it's coincidental that he can't go to sleep. But listen to this. They begin to read to the king, and then they come to the point, remember when Mordecai, through Esther, warned the king about those men who were trying to do him harm, and the king's life was saved. And the king said, well, did we ever do anything to reward that man? And they said, well, no, we can't find nothing in the record. Now, by the time we get to that point, Haman is on his way. And so now the king hears that Haman is out there and want to see him. And before Haman can ask the king to do Mordecai wrong, the king asked Haman a question. The king said, now, what shall we do? What shall we do? What shall be done? Chapter 6, verse 6. What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighted to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? All right. Y'all listen to the Bible. He was so egotistical, all self-centered, that he figured the king couldn't be talking about nobody but him. So now, hear what he said. The king ought to let some royal apparel, bring in some new clothes. That man and a horse that the king rideth on, and put a crown on his head, and let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array that man with whom the king delighted to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall be done to a man that the king delighted to honor. Throw him a parade, give him some new clothes, buy him a new car, let him go down the street so everybody can see him. That's what Haman said. King said, boy, that's a good idea. That sounds like a good idea. Then the king said in verse 10 to Haman, make haste and take the apparel, take the horse, and do everything you said, and do it to Mordecai. That ain't why he came there, y'all. But now, he must go and do as the king has said. Haman takes the apparel, the horse, arrayed Mordecai, brought him up on horseback through the street of the city, proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighted to honor. He didn't say it with any enthusiasm, y'all. Haman gets home and tells his wife and his buddies what has happened. As he's talking to him, he is now summoned to come to that second banquet that Esther has invited him to. And now it is at chapter 7, when they're in this second banquet, that now Esther reveals that Haman has determined to harm not only her people, but inclusive of her. chapter 7, verse 5. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, who is it, and where is he that does presume in his heart to do this? And let me in parentheses add, to you, sweetheart. That's in my mouth. Esther said the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Notice the adjective used to describe Haman. Adversary, enemy, wicked. Do you have any question as to what's motivating Haman? The devil? Satan? Now, Esther said the adversary, the enemy, wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and queen. The king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. So now he exits the room. Because remember, this is vice president. This is number 2 man. And so now he's angry, and he got to figure out what's going on. Now, while the king is in the garden, Haman stood up to make requests for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw there was evil determined against him by the king. So now he won't have the nerve to approach Esther and ask her to intervene on his behalf unto the king to kind of settle the king down. Well, now, just as he goes towards Esther, the king returns out of the garden into the place of the banquet of wine. And Haman was fallen upon the bed where Esther was. Then said the king, well, he forced the queen also before me in the house. As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. The king walked back in, and Haman over there near the queen. Y'all in here with me, church? Now, he already mad now, and Haman was sitting over there at the table on the opposite side. He walks out the room, come back, and Haman is now up there in the face of the queen. Is the story over? Can I stop there and go home? All right, well, he's not happy. One of the king's servants says, King, guess what? Haman built some gallows to hang Mordecai on today. King, them gallows are standing there. They are sure and they are firm. The king said, hang it on the same gallows that he built for Mordecai. Y'all in here with me, church? They hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. Let me summarize the rest of the book. So then Esther speaks to the king to try to get him to rescind the order that he's already signed, that the Jews may be attacked and destroyed. He says, I can't change the order, but what I can do is to let you defend yourself. So the king signs another decree that allows that if anybody attack them, that they can fight back and take care of themselves. And so, in the end, God prevails. Amen. The pivot point was Mordecai not bowing, reverencing evil. Amen. Don't bow to evil, church. Amen. Remember, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. In closing, to take a stand. Now, scholars tell us that the uniqueness of Esther in the book of Esther in the canon is that the name of God is not mentioned specifically in the book of Esther. And yet, don't you see the hand of God at work? Amen. Do you think it was an accident that Esther became the queen? Do you think it was an accident that Mordecai found out about the plot to kill the king? Do you think it was an accident? And back to the point that just really blew my mind was that Esther waited that second day to the second banquet to tell the king. See, I was ready the first day. Weren't y'all too? Tell the truth. Weren't y'all ready? Weren't y'all ready the first day for her to just go ahead on and tell the king what has happened? Yeah. Why didn't she? Well, I think one of the keys is this. Remember, she said, let's fast. And while it's not mentioned specifically in the text, but we know that fasting and prayer go hand in hand. It is my supposition that it was God who was orchestrating everything. And so God said, now, Esther, you're going to have to wait a day, because I'm going to keep old man up that night, and he's not going to be able to sleep. But what he's going to read in the chronicle of his own record is going to be a pathway through which I'm going to work, that when the time does come for you to tell him what I want you to tell him, then he'll be able to receive what you're going to tell him. See, church, God always knows what he's doing. And sometimes we may think it ought to be done yesterday, but you got to wait on the Lord. Y'all got to wake up now, wait on the Lord, and let God handle that thing. He's never late. He's always on time. Am I witnessing him? And he's an on-time God. Another observation that the scholars make, they say, well, it was evident that there was no mention of public assembly for worship. And when Esther was being considered for being queen, she partook in what was given before her to eat. And so she didn't follow the strict dietary rules of her people as to what was kosher and what was unclean. So they had issue with that. They said, well, and then she married an unsaved heathen man for a husband. And so they take issue with those things to say that those who had remained in Persia, who didn't go back to Jerusalem, had become assimilated, if you will. That they had lost some sense of identity towards the God of their salvation. Well, if that be the case, one lesson that we learn is God knows how to bring you back. Act like you bump your head and you can't remember what God has done for you if you want to. God knows how to bring you back. If they weren't praying, if they weren't fasting, if they had forgotten, God knows how to bring you back to where you want to be. Have I witnessing here today? And church, sometimes I think we don't give God enough credit for just being God and know what he's doing. You see, God could use this as an evangelistic outreach for his name. Because the Bible declares over in chapter 8 that when the people of the land saw how God had given power to his people, it said they began to follow the God of the Jews. And so when you take a stand for God, somebody gonna notice it, church. Y'all in here with me? You stand up for God. Anybody gonna stand up for God today? Anybody gonna witness for God today? And watch how God can bring folks that right now don't reverence or honor him, but when they see what God did in your life, it'll be a testimony. God bless you. God keep you.